Okay, so let's just jump right into this. We all have those weird habits, you know? The ones that drive us crazy, the ones that make us feel like we're our own worst enemy. But what if those very habits are actually your mind's secret service, working overtime on this hidden mission to protect you from yourself?
You know the feeling, right? A new relationship is going great, maybe a friendship is getting really deep, and then, bam, out of nowhere you just feel this powerful urge to pull back, to create some space. Does that sound at all familiar?
Or how about this one? You face a setback, maybe a loss, and instead of actually grieving, you find yourself making spreadsheets, researching every possible solution, basically turning a really messy human emotion into a neat, tidy little project.
This is the big idea we're going to unpack today. We're going to try and reframe these super frustrating behaviors. What if they're not failures at all, but actually these sophisticated, sometimes misguided strategies for self-protection? So, to really get a handle on these signs, we first have to understand the why behind them. We need to meet the secret agent running the whole operation, your unconscious guardian.
Right, so in psychology, these are called defense mechanisms. And honestly, the best way to think of them is like a mental immune system. They're these automatic, unconscious processes that just kick into gear to protect you from anxiety or shame or any feeling that just feels like too much to handle. They're actually crucial for our psychological survival.
And this slide, it just lays out the central paradox perfectly. In the short term, these defenses are an amazing shield. They give us relief, right? But if we lean on them too much for too long, that shield starts to feel more like a shackle. It stops us from growing, it gets in the way of our relationships, and it can lock us into the very patterns we're desperate to escape.
Okay, so how does this actually play out in real life? Well, let's look at our first sign. Building up these huge emotional walls, all to protect ourselves from getting hurt by other people. This is the unconscious logic that's running the show. See, if you've been hurt before, your mind learns a lesson. Getting close can be dangerous. So, to stop that pain from happening again, it launches a preemptive strike. You create distance before anyone else gets the chance. So, the really crucial thing to get here is that this emotional wall is doing a job. It's working. It's protecting you from those terrifying feelings of vulnerability and the risk of rejection. But the cost? Wow, the cost is immense. A wall that keeps out pain also keeps out love and joy and that true sense of belonging. It ends up creating the very isolation it was built to prevent.
All right, let's move on to our second sign. This one is for anybody out there who lives in their head. You know, using logic as this clever way to avoid all the messiness of the heart.
This is a defense mechanism called intellectualization. It's what happens when you take something that's really emotionally charged, like a breakup, a scary health diagnosis, a big fight, and you just strip it of all feeling. You start analyzing it like you're some detached scientist.
And again, it absolutely serves a purpose. It's shielding you from grief that feels like it could just drown you, or from truths that shake your whole sense of who you are. But the hidden cost is this deep emotional detachment. By just bypassing your feelings, you never really process the experience, which can leave you feeling stuck and even unable to make decisions that line up with what you truly want.
And now for a classic one, our third sign, procrastination and self-sabotage. I know it seems completely backwards, right? Why on earth would we undermine our own success? Well, because sometimes, believe it or not, failure feels safer.
This right here is the heart of self-handicapping. By not preparing for that big presentation, or by waiting till the last minute to study for the test, you're actually creating a built-in excuse. That way, if you fail, it wasn't because you weren't smart enough or good enough. No, it was just because you didn't have enough time.
What's so wild here is the sneaky logic of this loop. You face a challenge, that fear of failure kicks in, so you procrastinate. This creates the perfect excuse. So if you fail, it's not about your ability, it's just about your effort. Your ego is safe, but your potential, it stays locked away. This leads us perfectly into our fourth sign, the perfectionism prison. So many of us wear perfectionism like it's a badge of honor, but in reality, it's often a cage that's built entirely out of fear.
Wow, this quote just nails it. Perfectionism isn't really about striving for excellence. It's driven by this deep, underlying fear of shame. The fear that if we make a mistake, if we show even one tiny flaw, we'll be judged as unworthy, defective.
So this flawless armor, it's designed to protect you from judgment, from that awful feeling of being fundamentally flawed,
But just look at the cost. It fuels chronic anxiety. It often leads to massive procrastination because the fear of not being perfect is paralyzing, and it makes you avoid the very challenges you need to actually grow.
Okay, so we've identified all these protective patterns. What now? Well, the goal isn't to declare war on our own minds. It's to shift from these unconscious shields to conscious skills. It's about choosing courage over the false comfort of our defenses.
And this brings us to what I think is the true superpower in all of this: vulnerability. Our culture tells us constantly that vulnerability is weakness, but that is just plain wrong. Vulnerability is the absolute core of courage. It's the willingness to show up and be seen when you have zero control over the outcome.
And this is so important. You can't just tear down your defenses without building something new in their place. The real work is about developing self-awareness and learning new, more flexible ways to cope with stress, uncertainty, and fear. It's about having more tools in your emotional toolkit. So I want to leave you with this question. Your defenses, they're like a map. They point directly to your deepest fears: fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of shame. But think about this. On the other side of that fear is everything you really want. So what could you truly gain in your relationships, in your work, in your life, if you just chose courage instead?